Revolution 1040 WHBO Pinellas Park, Tampa Bay's all new News Talk 1040.
It's the only way I get news.
Our neighbor's choice. I'm your host, your neighbor, David Gronowski. So glad to be with you again across FM and AM and podcast and video stream and our website, neighborschoice.com. We're here on another adventure together as we're going to explore the news, the headlines, current events with the lens of history guiding us, giving us a secret weapon in our back pocket that we can use to decipher fake news and unleash the truth, unleash human potential beyond our wildest imaginations when we work together. It's important to work together. But when you use these little mantras like in it together, but it's actually very hateful and petty and disgusting, the things that people are pushing with those mantras, then you see through it. That people act like they're self-righteous. They act like they're all about, oh, we are in this together. But it's always demonizing people that go against their policies. If you question Joe Biden, that wonderful guy who's been running things in it together for 50 years, putting people away behind bars, putting people in human cages for nonviolent behaviors and choices, destroying families, so many families destroyed because of this man, so many countries demolished because of this man for no reason. And these people are so bigoted that they want power so much that if you question that man's garbage policies, they'll delete your story. You can't get a story. Remember, they deleted New York Post's Twitter page just because they exposed the horrible, disgusting grift and corruption that was taking place with the Biden family for years and years and years. They just totally deleted it. Deleted their Twitter page. Facebook was censoring it. They're bigots, man. They're bigots. They're not kind people. They're not, they're not acting with a bleeding heart. I mean, they're acting with cold, calculating desire to stamp out anybody who stands against their monolithic monomyth that is always in the service of power, always in the service of yesterday's way of solving problems, which is might makes right, which is bigotry, which is censorship, which is book burning. They bring that book burning ethos into the internet, into the digital age. And that's something that we should be very much joining in opposition against book burning. That's something that we should be totally disgusted with. That's something that we should be totally done with as a society. We should not have any tolerance for book burning censorship. And that's exactly what has been normalized by today's neoliberal Mcwoke left. And it's something that we should all be very, very concerned about and very, very fed up with. That means true liberals, true progressives, true independent folks, true conservatives, libertarians, whatever. We all have to stand against this kind of mind virus that wants to normalize the idea of censoring people that disagree with you. So we see breaking news. McConnell will allow Senate discussion of $2,000 direct stimulus after Bernie threatens to block NDAA veto override. That's on revolver.news. Another interesting story, Wikipedia co-founder Larry Sanger tortures fellow co-founder Jimmy Wales. This is, Jimmy Wales, this is a Twitter exchange. Says, if Trump's dying corrupt presidency succeeds in repealing the most important free speech provision after the First Amendment, I am going to be very cross and there will be consequences. Section 230 is for you, whoever you are. You are reading this and Section 230 is yours. Don't let them take it away. Will Chamberlain, a conservative commentator, says, you've allowed leftists to take over your site and wield it as a tool to defame conservatives. Why exactly should you be shielded from liability? And Jimmy Wales, the Wikipedia founder, says, literally none of what you say is true. And then Larry Sanger, who is one of the co-founders of Wikipedia, says, I have to agree with Will on this one. Everything he said is true. Have leftists taken over Wikipedia? Yeah, pretty much. Do those leftists defame conservatives? In spades. Does Section 230 shield the Wikipedia Foundation from liability? Yep. But further, does the internet need protections for free speech? You betcha. In the U.S., it's called the First Amendment, and that's very powerful. Does it need special protections for website owners who act as neutral platforms? Sure, that hasn't changed. But here's the question that the insane leftward dive of Wikipedia, Google, Facebook, and Twitter have put to the test. Does the internet need special protections for what purport to be neutral platforms, but which are in fact pick and choose information publishers? That's hard. So that's interesting. That's the point, is that these platforms are pretending to be neutral platforms, but in reality, they're very, very aggressive publishers. They're very, very aggressive editorializers. They censor anybody who challenges Big Pharma, anybody who challenges Big War Machine, anybody who challenges big regulatory, big nanny, state, big anything, big surveillance. They are always on the surface of the corporate, corrupt oligarchs. They don't stand for the little person. That's why, I don't see how their vision of the future is going to succeed, because they are reactionary or ideology now. The left used to be ones that would, they had their problems, but they stood for personal freedom. They stood for criticizing corrupt governments and corrupt giant corporations that were supported and protected by governments. They used to critique corporate welfare. They used to critique endless wars. They used to critique these things, and now they do none of that. Now they're like the worst of Dick Cheney and Bernie Sanders and Joe Biden and Bush and all these little cookie cutter, go along, get along hacks in DC. They're just a blended mess of these people, the left, the Democratic Party, and the neoliberal corporate press. So it's a far cry from where it's been. And it's time that we have a new conversation that is diversified, that is tolerant of disagreement, and that does not censor honest reporting about bigots and corrupt officials like the Biden family. We'll be back in just a moment with more live on A Neighbor's Choice.
This portion of the upcoming amazing broadcast is brought to you by the law firm of Catania & Catania, award-winning personal injury, auto, and motorcycle accident attorneys, serving Tampa Bay families for over 28 years.
Here's one thing you can scratch off your to-do list without going anywhere, without any out-of-pocket cost to you, and even get up to $150 cash back. Get that crack in your windshield fixed by calling Auto Glass America. They'll come to you, and with comprehensive insurance coverage, there's no cost to you. Call Auto Glass America now and fix that pane in the glass with premium glass and a lifetime warranty. Call 813-96-GLASS, 813-96-GLASS. Auto Glass America.
Not ready to go to your favorite seafood restaurant? Get the highest quality fish for less delivered straight to your door by Fast Fresh Seafood. Order our fresh hot snapper, grouper, mahi, and more. They're boneless, skinless, flash frozen the same day, and individually vacuum wrapped. Pick the size filet you want, the amount you want, and checkout's easy at fastfreshseafood.com. The best thing, every fish is on sale. Fastfreshseafood.com. Caught fresh for you, delivered straight to you. Stay home and stay safe.
Looking to enhance your workout at home social distancing? There's no better way to do that than with a post-workout supplement from Fortify. It's the new all-in-one pre- and post-workout supplement. It's completely all-natural with no artificial flavors or sweeteners. Fortify Fit is the first of its type in the U.S. Fortify Fit combines all 10 of the latest sports nutrition ingredients in one canister. Build muscle, strength, endurance with Fortify Fit. Plus, it'll kickstart your immune system quickly, safely. Right now, you receive 25% off by using the code RADIO. Use the code RADIO to receive the 25% off discount. Fortify Fit, created and designed by board-certified Dr. Michael Lang. You know him as the radio host of Ask the Doctor. Get Fortify Fit with 2 delicious flavors, strawberry, watermelon, and fruit punch. Amazing results when using pre- and post-workouts. Fortify Fit, available at fortified.com. That's FORTIFEYE.com. Remember the EYE in Fortify. Dr. Michael Lang's Fortify Fit with 2 delicious flavors, keeping America fit and healthy during this time of precautionary change.
They say it should be impossible for bumblebees to fly because their wings are too small for their bodies. But bumblebees don't care. They just fly. Bright Expectations is dedicated to helping our Florida residents with special needs and unique abilities find the resources, support, and inspiration that they and their families need to break barriers and achieve their dreams. Visit www.brightexpectations.com to start your journey today.
This message is sponsored by the Florida Department of Health, the Florida Association of Broadcasters, and this radio station.
New guidelines show it's relatively safe for women with epilepsy to become pregnant, but it's recommended they avoid the seizure drug valproate since the drug can cause birth defects. For more information on these guidelines from the American Academy of Neurology and American Epilepsy Society, visit thebrainmatters.org.
A Neighbor's Choice returns. And, we talk a lot about criminal justice reform and clemencies. And, you hear from a lot of the great folks in that space on the front lines of change and serious reform. And one of the things that came out recently that I wanted to talk about is a story you can hear here in complex.com. It says former hip hop producer Weldon Angelos receives pardon from Trump. Former producer and Snoop Dogg collaborator Weldon Angelos received a full pardon from President Donald Trump after being sentenced to 55 years in prison, the article says. Angelos was initially arrested for selling $350 worth of weed to an undercover officer with a concealed firearm and was sentenced to 55 years in prison without parole in 2004. He was among the 15 people that Trump pardoned this past Tuesday. And so we have Weldon Angelos with us. How you doing, Weldon?
Hey, pretty good. How about yourself?
I'm doing great, and it's a great thing to have you back on the program in light of this great news.
Yeah, I'm happy to be here. It's probably one of the best days of my life.
Yeah, you just got I saw that you had posted on social media the pardon. It came through, right?
Yeah, the pardon came through, and that's when I knew it was real.
Right.
When I saw the piece of paper, that's literally when I knew this is real.
I mean, how does that feel? Tell me what does it feel like to have a full pardon, which is beyond just clemency, right?
It's beyond amazing to be able to actually be a real citizen again, and because this is something I dreamed about my whole life, and or at least since my incarceration. That one day being able to have all of my rights back, not being, having to check that box, not being able to have to turn down camping trips because people are going to go hunting. And if you go around a firearm, you risk getting 10 years in prison. And so, all that's gone with the stroke of Trump's pen. And I'm super grateful for that.
Now, how did this happen? I mean, it was just Donald Trump saw your story apparently, right? Or the Trump administration got behind this?
Yeah, so there was a couple people advocating for me, Mike Lee being the biggest person. I mean, Mike Lee got it done. I had support of Rand Paul, which I was very grateful for, support from Alice Johnson, and support from former U.S. Attorney Brett Tolman, who happens to be my prosecutor's former boss, at least during the tail end of my case. And so to have all of them, there was other supporters, but those were like the key people. And without Mike Lee, I don't know if it would have happened. And so I'm grateful to Mike Lee. It also wouldn't have happened had I went through the traditional process through the Department of Justice pardon attorney. I definitely wouldn't have gotten a pardon just because they're so strict on what they are willing to consider for a favorable recommendation.
Well, they've talked about a great reset coming into 2021. And I think a pardon is a pretty darn good, great reset for you, right? You've got a whole new, fresh start here in which you can build on. And I know you've been very involved behind the scenes with advocating for the clemencies and pardons and reforms taking place in this space of criminal justice reform. But heading into the new year with this huge opportunity in front of you, where do you go from here? What's next?
I think I'm just going to keep doing what I've been doing, working to get people out of prison and change policy, working on a number of things. This just allows me to do that much more effectively. And I think, we're going to have a really productive 2021.
Yeah. So what do you think is next in the criminal justice reform space? Is there a particular bill that you guys are looking at, or a different focus,
so
emphasis?
we're working to pass the MORE Act.
Okay.
The MORE Act takes cannabis, it removes it from their federal schedule, basically decriminalizing on the federal level, allowing states to legalize and not have to worry about federal interference, not having to worry about interstate commerce, using the mailing system, the banking system. And I think we have a really good shot at passing that bill in 2021. We've reached out to the Koch network, Charles Koch, the billionaire businessman, and got their support to come up with a version that can actually pass in the Republican Senate.
Wow. And so that's something that's going to be kind of coming in early on in 21, you think, huh?
Yeah, and it would release anyone in prison who has a cannabis offense. It would reduce their sentence completely, and so we're really excited about that aspect of it.
So would that be like a early release, or time served, or a pardon, or how would that be?
Yeah, so if anyone who has a pure cannabis case, they'd be time served, ready to go home. If you have multiple charges, the cannabis portion of the sentence would be reduced to 0 months. So it'd be time served on those sentences.
Now, your case was a mandatory minimum case, and that's where it got a lot of attention because it was kind of a throwing the book at you kind of deal, right?
Yeah, it was over prosecution. I mean, they literally charged me. They took 3 small marijuana sales and turned it into a 20-count federal indictment where I was facing 105 years of mandatory imprisonment based on those sales. It was a overzealous prosecution for sure.
Right. And so that's one of the things is that something that what would need to be done at the federal level to get rid of those mandatory minimums? We had the First Step Act.
We did that with the First Step Act. The First Step Act actually got rid of those mandatory minimums.
So is there anything else that needs to be reformed in that mandatory minimum space at the federal level, or has that been
yeah, we need to make those provisions retroactive. The ones that were passed, only one of them was retroactive, and so we need to make those retroactive.
Right. Very interesting. So I think all of this is very interesting, and I think we have to continue to build on this momentum. And I mean, it's a huge opportunity that you have, and I kind of want to get people motivated to get really in touch with this space, the criminal justice reform space. So where can people stay in touch with what you're doing and focus in on the efforts that are being done in this space?
They can go to the weldonproject.org, or they can follow me on Instagram at Weldon Angelos or at Project Mission Green.
Project Mission Green. Well, very good. It's been a pleasure talking to you, Weldon, and we'll keep up with your story and keep up with what goes on from here.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thanks for joining us. So, folks, that's what we're all about on this program. We're all about highlighting the stories of people overcoming what I believe to be clear cases of collective violence in which society does not think in a rational way in the way it treats human beings. This is someone, you saw the sentence that he was facing for accusation of possession of a firearm and marijuana. And, governments did not create, the United States government did not invent the firearm. They did not invent. In fact, the Second Amendment says that it is a right that precedes the existence of the United States federal government. That's why the Bill of Rights says that it is not to be touched. The idea that you have the right to possess a firearm and to protect yourself is not something that the federal government has any purview in touching. And it doesn't say, well, it doesn't make an exception unless you have a particular herb or plant that we find to be a politically expedient thing to make a lot of money locking people up for. It doesn't say that in the Second Amendment. Did you see that there? Was that in the fine print? Was that in the footnote? Didn't see that there. But a lot of people who want to play God, they want to be nanny state dictators, the same people that want to lock people up for cutting hair during this pandemic, or they want to destroy people's businesses and mandate that you can't even have outdoor dining and all these ridiculous stuff. These folks, the same mindset, overwhelmingly is behind this idea of locking people up, destroying families. I mean, think about how awful and traumatic that is for a kid to be separated from their parent, especially for something like this. It's one thing if someone is a violent person and they've been proven to be doing violent things, and then you need to give them a timeout from society. That makes sense. That's what law is for. That's the point of having a cage, right? You give people a timeout. If you have a prison system, it's for violence. It's for preventing violence. It's for punishing violence. It's for keeping that away from continuing. But nobody is going to be harmed in an active way from having people who are with marijuana on the streets. In fact, it will be less violent when you have a legal market, because when you criminalize something, what you do is you create a shortcut to heaven that leads to hell. You create a violent black market. It doesn't matter what it is. I tell people all the time, you could criminalize chocolate, right? A lot of people like chocolate. You make a law saying, hey, chocolate is behind a lot of the morbid obesity and all kinds of diseases. People eat a lot of it. So therefore, we're going to criminalize it. And it will only be available for medical license marijuana or something, medical chocolate or something you have to get. And that's the way they try to do with marijuana. But if you created a black market, if you created a law preventing chocolate, it would turn into a violent black market overnight. Same thing for caffeine. You could say, hey, the Red Bulls and Monster energy drinks and so forth are correlated with violent episodes with heart issues. And so therefore, we're going to ban the consumption of these energy drinks. That's a shortcut to heaven, which is we're trying to keep people healthy, but it leads to hell on earth, because what would happen? Instantly, the price of Monster and Red Bull on the black market would go up, and people who are most likely to be aggressive and antisocial in their conduct are going to gravitate to the selling and manufacturing of Red Bull and Monster. And instead of settling conflict disputes with contract law like they do now, the energy drink space would be handled with violence because it's an illegal market. Therefore, they don't have recourse to settle things with contract law like a market provides. So that's what happens when you introduce shortcuts. There are no shortcuts in life. Shortcuts destroy the fabric of a society. And again, we would understand this if we would be honest in our roots of understanding what Jesus said when he says, do not resist evil with violence. You may think it's evil to have marijuana. You may think it's evil to own a gun. You may think it's evil to an AR-15, but the moment you use the state to resist that perceived evil with violence, you create more violence. You create more evil because you're not following the social ordering principle that Jesus explained in that passage. Turn the other cheek is not a Hallmark greeting. It's not a wishful thought. It's a description of how the world will function in the light of the coming of the revelation that Jesus has introduced into history. We can no longer get away with using might makes right, because we don't have the level of violence that the ancient world employed to make might makes right work. It just doesn't work anymore. And so therefore, when Jesus says, you got to learn to not resist evil with violence, he's describing this is the way you got to function now. It's not just a wishful thought. This is literally how you're going to have to deal with evil. You're not going to be able to resist it with violence, because if you do, it'll create more evil and more violence. And the drug war is a perfect example of it. So is this nanny state, the Great Reset, the war on poverty. All those different phony things are great examples of what Jesus was talking about when he outlined the vision for the way the world would unfold. We'll be back in just a moment after this short break.
There is all kinds of lunacy going on in the madness of 2020.
Weekdays 11 to 2.
I'm just so fed up with these Democrats. It's unbelievable.
Get it straight from Chris Plant.
They're so hypocritical. It makes me sick.
It's the Chris Plant Show.
This has just got me going on.
And the left is waging war against the police in the United States.
Telling it like it is.
You should be thanked profusely for getting to the point. You're a voice of reason in the sea of idiots.
The Chris Plant Show. Weekdays 11 to 2. News Talk 1040 WHPO.
A negative critique of the Trump administration vaccine rollout from his scheduled successor, Joe Biden.
But as I long feared and warned, the effort to distribute and administer the vaccine is not progressing as it should.
Biden in Wilmington, Delaware, says the vaccination effort is falling far behind, that it'll take years to vaccinate the American people at the current pace. He says he will ramp it up. President Trump said in October that there'd be 20 million vaccines by the end of the year. President Trump tweeting, unless Republicans have a death wish, it is also the right thing to do, they must approve the $2,000 payments ASAP. Senate Republican leader Mitch McConnell has blocked immediately considering president's demand for that higher COVID relief payment to Americans. No word on the next steps. The first commercial flight of a Boeing 737 MAX aircraft with paying customers in nearly 2 years has happened. A flight from Miami to New York. 2 fatal crashes led to a grounding and design changes. Chuck Sievertson, ABC News.
Our Neighbor's Choice is back. And it's great to have you with us here. We are on a mission to challenge fake news, not as a reaction to them, but as a proactive approach to creating the world that we all want. We all want to have good quality education. We all want to have safe streets and neighborhoods. We all want to have healthy, nutritious diet and lifestyle. We all want to have prosperous opportunities for those who come after us. All of those things are available, but it includes being able to be honest with our speech. And right now we have a society in which we are being locked more and more into this kind of gaslighting narrative, in which the only way to prove that you're not a horrible person is to mouth the rhetoric of social justice ideology, what I call the Mcwoke Revolution. And joining me to talk about that is the founder of newdiscourses.com. He is a math PhD, and he's someone who's apolitical and against totalitarianism, James Lindsay. How you doing, James?
Hey, good. How you doing?
I'm doing great, and it's great to have you on the program because I saw this story in the New York Times, and I wanted to get your thoughts on it, your comments. I'd seen a little bit about it on your page, but it's the story in the New York Times called "A Racial Slur, a Viral Video, and a Reckoning." And it's about a white high school student. She withdrew from her chosen college after a 3-second video caused an uproar online. And apparently it was released by a classmate who shared the video. Could you give us a little context for this and your perspective?
Sure. So the first piece of context everybody needs to know, I know you're not supposed to frame these things like this, but the first piece of context is shame on the New York Times. Absolutely shame on the New York Times for this. What has happened here, and I'll tell a little bit about the story in a second, is the New York Times has thrown all of its considerable weight behind teen drama. And in fact, a particularly grotesque piece of teen drama, which is just absolutely beyond the pale. It's attacking an individual, a private individual, not a public figure. It's throwing its weight behind that. It's created a tremendous amount of distress for the young woman, for their family. It's embroiled my alma mater, the University of Tennessee, in a scandal that, I mean, may fire and brimstone fall on the University of Tennessee for this, speaking as an alumnus. May nobody ever give it any money again, speaking as an alumnus. So here, that's my framing. There's my context. So what has happened is that this young woman used the N-word in a 3-second Snapchat clip when she was 15 years old as a freshman in high school, ostensibly learning to drive, following the style of, as she put it in her own words, all of the music that she and her friends listened to. She sent that to one friend. She said, "I can drive N-words," kind of, a little hip hop flavor to her articulation. Sent this little clip of herself on Snapchat to a friend. Another person, Jimmy Galligan, filmed the friend's phone to get a video of this 3-second little clip of this girl saying this, and then saved that video for 3 years to wait until this young woman became accepted to the University of Tennessee and accepted to the very competitive cheer squad, and then unleashed it as you said, reckoning, in order to get her removed from that dream opportunity to teach her a lesson 3 years later. And so this Jimmy Galligan character is a young biracial male who held on to this little clip that wasn't ever even sent to him, so it certainly wasn't a racial slur directed at him, for 3 years to do this. And then, of course, the University of Tennessee caves to this ridiculously against a statement put out about freedom of speech that's part of the university, given by their board of trustees, in violation of its own policies, in order to avoid having some kind of, PR mess on their hands based on this thing being leveraged against them. And then the New York Times, which is supposed to be one of the most storied journalistic institutions in our country, throws its weight behind this literal piece of vindictive teenage drama. This is racism equivalent of revenge porn, which is not something anybody looks at very kindly, and if I'm not mistaken, is now illegal.
So what did the New York Times, how did they just, did they say this was a totally great thing, or did they try to act like a little bit nuanced, or how did they spin this?
The New York Times portrayed it as a reckoning in this kind of growing narrative that they've been pushing now for several years, but with kind of at a crescendo over the past several months, that we're having some kind of a race reckoning in America on these very peculiar terms, where things like this are apparently New York Times worthy stories, that a teenager said something keeping up with the hip hop she and her friends listen to, and then some guy sits on it 3 years, drops it. I mean, it's just absolutely preposterous. The New York Times framed this out where the young man is a hero, the young woman is barely given any due. It does mention, the article does mention that in fact the young woman, whose name is Mimi Groves, supported Black Lives Matter all summer. She supported it ever since the whole thing blew up, and I don't know what before that. She said in her statement to the New York Times that she, she gave the standard unfortunate response. She takes full responsibility. She wishes she hadn't said it, blah, blah, blah. And so, I mean, it was a standard kind of drive this narrative, this racially divisive narrative that has become kind of the flavor of the year of the gray lady, the New York Times. It's utterly, again, it's just utterly shameful. I have no positive thing to say about it whatsoever at this point.
Yeah, it reminds me of the way, Rene Girard, the anthropologist from Stanford, the way he talked about whenever you had a witch burning or an inquisition, it was always important for the collective community to get the victim to confess their guilt, either in the actual moment of the trial or accusation, in which a community would come together. Maybe there's a plague, maybe there's a famine, maybe there's a great reset, a new normal, there's something different, and you need to create a kind of catharsis, a kind of release from the tension of the trouble. And in order to get the process complete, it was necessary for the community to get the accused person to admit that they were indeed a witch or a monster or a sorceress or sorcerer, and that would lead to, once they admitted to it, to them being killed. And if they didn't get it to be admitted in the moment, they would write a story about it in which they would transmit guilt to the character in their mouth by saying, yes, they admitted they were the monster, they were the heretic or whatever. And so we had to do what was required, which is to punish them and kill them. Of course, we don't do it exactly that extreme in this sense today, but that's the same exact, kind of formula that we see on play and display with today's American Mcwoke social justice culture, right? Which is you have to get them to admit guilt, and then you still expel them, right? That's the point, right?
That's right. This is the same logic. I mean, you mentioned those examples. This is the same logic that we saw in the witch trials. This is the same logic that we see, portrayed, therefore, in Arthur Miller's The Crucible. It's the same logic we see portrayed in, pushed onto Hester Prynne in The Scarlet Letter. If you want to talk about kind of American literature and American historicity, it's also the same logic of the Maoist Cultural Revolution, where you would get these people to have to confess their rightist intents. They were, like right-wing ideology that Mao was going after, that he claimed all of his enemies had, or their bourgeois values, or whatever it was. And you had this unleashed the young people who were miseducated in the Chinese schools by Mao and his associates, to go and attack their parents, to attack their peers, to attack their teachers, and in that case, physically, not just this kind of reputational suicide. And then the stories and the papers would reflect it. It's the same logic as that. And what people, I don't think, realize is that what you just described is actually the exact setup. We're talking about this case with this young woman in the university, in the New York Times, but it's the exact setup that we're all placed into on social media with their policies right now, their moderation policies. Where if you tweet something, for example, on Twitter that doesn't even fall outside of the rules, but is ambiguous enough to where Twitter can then ban your account for several hours or days or whatever, or lock you out of it. I actually know some examples where this has happened, where somebody is not in violation of the policy, and then they offer the ability to appeal after somebody gets locked out for a non-violation. And they say, or they give you the option. You can appeal, or you can just delete the tweet and admit that it was against the rules, even though it wasn't. And if you give that confession, it says right on the thing that they send to you, 3 strikes and you're out. So now you are admitting by deleting the tweet that you must have broken the rules, even though you didn't break the rules necessarily. Some people do break rules. I'm not trying to make it out where everything's not a rule violation, although that's its own conversation. So this logic is playing out with social media censorship. It's played out against this young woman with the weight of major journalistic. I mean, now it's a national story. I was on Fox News last night to talk about it. Her lawyer was on Fox News to talk about it. It's become this national interest story. And this poor 18-year-old girl 3 years ago, having no idea that she's just, doing her thing with her friends, was setting herself up for this. And again, it's the same logic as the witch hunts. It's the same logic as Mao.
And there's this theme here about social justice ideology that I want to unpack just a little bit, because there is this obsession with words. They believe that language constructs reality, and it's all about words, but there's no concern for real violence. I mean, this is a media and an ideology that was very, very active in the election of Joe Biden. And this is a man who spent his entire career exploiting people of color and poor people and everybody he could find who he could lock up for nonviolent crimes. This is a person who made his career bombing people of color around the world. When the military-industrial complex told that boy to stand, he stood. When they told him to sit, he sat. He is a useful little tool for the worst types of physical torture and suffering and exploitation that a state can come up with. That's what he's done. He's always been there for Iraq and all the horrible things that our neoliberal establishment has done. And yet there's not a single word of criticism about that. But there's criticism for a high school kid for saying something in imitation of a hip hop lyric when they were a kid. There's something totally insane about this religion that has to be talked about.
I'm glad you said the word insane. I don't know if you've read one of my most recent articles I wrote for New Discourses. It's very long. It's very difficult. I do encourage everybody to take the time to suffer through it and read it, because I actually think, and I hate to sound this way, but I think it's the most important thing that I've ever written. And it's titled Psychopathy and the Origins of Totalitarianism. And so that is what's going on, is that we have this psychopathic logic. You said that that these people operate as though language constructs reality. And what I argue, following the Catholic philosopher Joseph Piper, is that what language actually constructs is something called a pseudo-reality, a false reality, a fake reality. And then the entire logic of totalitarianism is that people create such a thing, a false reality, and then they use rhetorical language tricks language games, as Wittgenstein put it, and then the postmodern philosophers ran with. And they try to trick people into believing that we inhabit a false reality until they become so confused between false reality, in which something like this is a high crime, and something like, Joe Biden's various, not only behaviors that you described, but also his ties to China and so on. Everything else that is all been coming to light are all irrelevant. And so they create the pseudo-reality and drag people into it by browbeating them morally and by twisting them around with logic that is not actually logic, what Leotard called a paralogy or paralogic, some fake logic that lies beside it, until they can't distinguish reality and false reality from one another any longer, at which point they are functionally psychopathic. And this is where this logic plays out. So this poor young woman, is the victim of a society that's got one foot in reality and one foot in this pseudo reality that's constructed around a false narrative about race, a false narrative about sex, gender, sexuality, all of these factors of identity. We're not allowed to say, if you look at, I don't know if did you know they removed the cultural Marxism entry from Wikipedia recently? No, they removed the cultural Marxism and replaced it with cultural Marxism conspiracy theory. So you can't call it cultural Marxism anymore. So I suggest we call it identity Marxism. Because it's what it really is. It's not even really culture at this point. Cultural Marxism referred to things that people were talking about in the 30s. We're talking about something completely different. That's all identity politics. So it's identity Marxism. And they've dragged people into this pseudo-real world where power dynamics of identity are everything. And like you said, exactly like you said, this is all just a construction of language. It's a bunch of tricks and traps they use to trick people into playing on their terms to describe a world that doesn't really exist. And you can see how successful they are. And the New York Times putting out an article like this against Mimi Groves, for example, they are building CNN, everything that they've done this year. The Twitter, when they banned, speaking of Joe Biden, they banned the New York Post's account for, I don't remember, 11, 12, 14, something like that, days for breaking the laptop story that was a non-story. NPR said, we don't waste our time on stories that are not stories. Then all of a sudden the election happens. Joe Biden appears to win under dubious circumstances, and bam, that laptop's real again. How about that? Mm-hmm. This is the construction of a pseudo-real political manipulation. And it's I almost stutter to try to get people to see it. We're being pulled into a false reality that is the realm of psychopathic totalitarians.
Well, people wonder,
but the story about this young woman's the same thing.
And James, people wonder, in the ancient world, when they say, well, why would everybody go along with letting a priest rip out people's hearts and offer it to some god? But this is what humans do. They get locked up in this hypnotic world of language, and that's what oral tradition and mythology represented in a more primitive, more visceral form. The same thing that we see here, which is, people will do horrible things if they get caught up in this pseudo reality that says, hey, look, our ancestors said whenever the gods are angry, we have to offer sacrifice. And don't you know, we're not getting along, which means there's bad blood, which means the gods are angry, which means go get those slaves, or go get those peasants, or go take out that old king who's got too much gray hair. He's been on the throne too long. There needs to be a kind of venting of passion and anger onto common scapegoats. And that's exactly what this whole social justice religion is doing. It's trying to revivify the old, ancient practice of scapegoating to create meaning and catharsis and to create transcendent unity. But it's not going to work. That's the problem.
That's exactly right.
Hey, let's take a quick break and get a little bit more into what people can expect when they go to newdiscourses.com, your website. I'm here with James Lindsay. We'll be back in just a moment as we look at this social justice ideology, what I call the Mcwoke Revolution. Will it succeed? We'll find out in just a moment. Hello, this is David Gronowski with A Neighbor's Choice. I've got a mission for you. I'm a big believer in eating family farm-raised, high-quality, grass-fed beef. That's why I'm a frequent customer of White Oak Pasture, a 6th-generation beautiful farm in southwest Georgia. Support sustainable, delicious meat of the highest quality. Ask for White Oak Pasture's beef at your local grocery here in Florida, or go to whiteoakpastures.com, and first-time customers get 20% off on purchases with our exclusive coupon code NEIGHBOR.
Do you despise lawyers? That may be the case until you need one. If you've been in an auto accident and need legal advice, go to the local attorneys that have served Tampa Bay families for over 28 years. Catania and Catania. They are family owned. They understand your needs with legal advice. When you need legal representation, Catania will care for your case from the beginning to final settlement. You won't need to worry. Catania will represent you throughout the entire process. Auto and motorcycle accidents are too frequent in Florida. If you've been a victim, contact Catania. They don't get paid if you don't get paid. Referrals on request. Contact Catania, putting families first.
Offices Tampa, non-attorney spokesperson.
The following is a public service message from this station and calltorecycle.org. Chances are you already recycle paper, glass, and plastic, but it's just as important to recycle used rechargeable batteries. They're the kind you find in power tools, cell and cordless phones, laptop computers, digital cameras, MP3 players, and other cordless electronics. You can recycle used rechargeable batteries at any of the thousands of retail stores that have joined the nonprofit Call to Recycle program. Those include home improvement centers, electronics stores, and other retailers all across America. To find a participating drop-off location, call toll-free 877-2RECYCLE or visit us online at calltorecycle.org. Recycling used rechargeable batteries is easy, it's free, and it's a great way to do something good for the environment. Just remember, if it's rechargeable, it's recyclable.
Hi, I'm Randy Jackson. When I was diagnosed with type 2 diabetes, I also learned about its serious connection with cardiovascular disease. I knew I needed to make some major lifestyle changes that would help me manage my type 2 diabetes. These tips help me stay in the know. Keep active, normalize critical health numbers, opt for a healthy lifestyle, and work with a healthcare provider.
I'm Dr. Dan Jones. Please visit your own healthcare provider. And for more information, visit iknowdiabetes.org.
Neighbor's Choice is back. I'm David Gronowski, your host. Our website, neighborschoice.com. Always enjoy your comments, your emails, your feedback. And we're here with James Lindsay, who is the founder of newdiscourses.com, which is really taking it to the Mcwoke social justice religion that you hear about so much today, which the media is just infatuated by. James, I just want to kind of land the plane here in this last moment about what people can expect at newdiscourses.com, what the kind of content you have, some of the programs that you're developing. I saw here you posted an example of some of the insanity of this woke ideology. You said how wokeness creates a national security threat, and it's U.S. math education versus Chinese math education. And it's about this. It's from this guy talking about how we have to teach that 2 + 2 could equal 4 or 2 + 2 could equal 5 unless we want to be white supremacists and maintain that 2 + 2 = 4. Where in the world is this stuff? I mean, again, it is a kind of hypnosis, a kind of hallucination, isn't it?
The best way to phrase it is that it's the construction of a pseudo reality, a false reality in which those people have power. Because if sometimes 2 + 2 can equal 4 and sometimes 2 + 2 can equal 5, then that means you have to turn to that person, that teacher is what he calls himself, to tell you which one it is, when, and why. You can't figure it out for yourself. You can't solve serious problems. You have to turn to the people who are going to tell you what the truth is, and they're the ones who are going to be in charge now. So it's just this whole construction to create power for themselves.
Just like an arcane religion where the priestly caste is necessary because you can't figure out how to say all the chants right and all the rituals right, because you might screw it up. So you got to let them run the show, right?
That's exactly right. It's the exact same dynamic. It's the exact same thing that, and not to get too Christian on you, but it's the same thing Jesus rebuked in the Pharisees. Frankly, my Christian friends have been helping me to understand that better. Just like we were talking about before the break, this whole thing where we see this, Mimi Grove, this young woman losing her dream to be a cheerleader for the University of Tennessee after she qualifies based on the silly thing. You have child sacrifices, just like you see in the Old Testament. If we want to go all into the Bible, it's the whole ball story right there all over again. And so, it's a dark new religion, although ultimately its purpose is to open the door for a party, a Soviet-style party, that is going to adjudicate what is and what is not true according to its standards. That's where we are.
So, in closing, do you think it will succeed? And what's the antidote? And where do we go from here?
Well, I don't know if it will succeed. I am torn between a functional optimism, or if I become pessimistic, what good is that? But we're at the most serious threat that we have been in probably since the 1930s. And people need to realize that. And if we don't want this to succeed and topple Western civilization, then that means people have to become aware of it. They have to learn to recognize it. And they have to learn to say, no, I'm not going to participate in this. We're going to play in reality. We're not going to play in this fake pseudo-reality. That's not how things really are. I'm trying to provide part of the answer for that. There are going to be lots of different people doing different things, but I've made new discourses to try to help people understand the nature of this pseudo-reality. So I have mostly articles on the main site. I have an entire social justice encyclopedia where I show you the tricks of language, where they've redefined words so that they mean two different things at once when they use them among themselves and when they push them out into the world to make their activism work. So you can see the pieces of their pseudo-reality. I've tried to produce a podcast somewhat regularly to get people who don't want to read so they can listen. There are videos, I give talks. So New Discourses is trying to provide resources. There are other people who are trying to fight back more practically by, getting groups of lawyers together to sue schools, to encourage people to start thinking themselves as potential plaintiffs, to bring people together so that they can share and learn together.
Very good. We're out of time, but just in the last second or so, if you can think of, what's the thing you admire the most about the critical theory school, this woke crowd? Is there something you admire about them?
I mean, the good ones among them care. They care too much, and that's always a dangerous thing, but you can't hate somebody for caring.
Yeah. It reminds me of C.S. Lewis and the moral busybodies, how they make the worst tyranny imaginable,
That's right. That's right.
Well, very good. James Lindsay, always a pleasure. And visit his website, newdiscourses.com. That's newdiscourses.com. I'm David Gronowski. Godspeed.